The CW Chronicles. Sinners. Written by Silvano Williams. All content copyright 2013-2023. All rights reserved. Chapter 4. Dark Clouds on the Horizon. A tiny moon orbited a dwarf planet filled with lush vegetation and clear oceans. The rocky moon had served as the Adiran battlefield outpost, and was now but a smoldering and blazing reminder of the sudden death at the hands of the space armada. It illuminated the emptiness of space with its destruction. Enveloping the upper atmosphere of the planet, a thick layer of clouds sheltered the colorful vegetation below from the harm that lurked in space. The water on the planet was bright teal, the shores rich with a foamy white undertow, and in the places where the bare ground was visible, reddish-orange earth contrasted with the water and vegetation. The wild vegetation was abundant, and foliage from trees and large plants ranged from all shades of green to bright violet to mixtures of colors that changed their hue depending on how the light reflected off them. Most importantly, however, was the mainland of the planet, where small settlements hid within the vegetation housing made from the moist red earth and leafy plants, in harmony with the environment around them. Small amphibian creatures came out of the dwellings, curious about the thundering sounds heard over the horizon. In many, an expectant look appeared on their frog-like faces. Meanwhile, on the dark side of the planet, the space armada hovered, staying hidden within the clouds of the outer layer of the atmosphere. The fiery moon was above them, slowly orbiting away toward the sunny side of the planet. Clustered amid the clouds, the space armada covered a third of the planet's sky. Villain navigated around the armada.
"Master,"
a robotic voice said inside Villain's cockpit. His ship was much smaller and simpler than ours. There weren't a lot of monitors, and the cockpit was surprisingly empty and dark. Except for the hums of some of the console's processes, the rest of the controls were off, and he was manually flying it. Most of the active cockpit controls were within a finger's reach for him. Villain pushed a series of buttons, which allowed the communication to continue.
"We have Captain Wadaverse's shuttle visible in the radar traveling through subspace toward us,"
the robotic voice said.
"All other Dimension Police spacecraft have encrypted their signals or are out of our radar range."
Villain typed on the consoles. This time, he brought up a small floating map in front of him, which showed our trajectory through the dimensions. After a few seconds of watching the map, he activated his fighter's controls, which brought the rest of the cockpit lights to life. Several small monitors appeared around him, showing different things like the ship's status and the weapons cache. He then maneuvered out of the space armada swarm. Those in his way opened a path for him to fly across to the moon. As he zoomed away toward the burning moon above them, he only spoke 3 words to his armada.
"Remember the plan."
And then he shut off his microphone.
"This moment has been a millennium in the making,"
he said to himself. If only he could feel joy or happiness, he would have felt a sense of pride in his accomplishment. However, as it was, Villain felt nothing. Only the ephemeral need to satisfy his impulses and desires, which ended with the success of his goals, leaving no residual emotion. There was never a feeling of triumph savored after.
"This time,"
he thought,
"this time, things will end differently."
he had waited for too long, and gone through too much for any of it to not matter to him anymore. The voice over his intercom interrupted his musings.
"Master, Captain Wadaverse's ship will arrive in 10 seconds and counting."
At that exact moment, the space armada began to align themselves in a side-by-side formation.
8 seconds.
On the planet below, most of the small frog-like creatures had ventured out of their habitats and abodes, calling out to each other, fascinated by the dark clouds on the horizon slowly approaching them from above.
6 seconds.
The creatures clamored at the hazy, burning moon, as the solidifying dark clouds blocked the skies above them.
4 seconds.
Villain landed atop the scorched rubble of the destroyed Dimension Police outpost on the moon. His position was a direct view looking at the armada and the planet below.
2 seconds.
Villain shut off all the ship's controls except for the intercom.
Arrival confirmed.
The space armada finished setting up their formation just as our ship materialized from quantum space. At that very moment, every space armada ship shot a bubble of pulsating energy toward the planet below them.
"So, Vlad,"
The sudden sound of Ilona's voice brought me back to my own reality. I whiplashed back to my cell, where her disapproving tone echoed all around me.
Do you have a reason why you are changing the details of some of these events?
She asked. I ignored her. I was upset and angry. It was freaking freezing again. She persisted.
No, sir. You do not get to play dumb with me. If we're going to do this and use it as evidence, you are going to have to be transparent and unbiased about these events, Vlad.
I said to her, I refuse to call CW by any other official name than CW or Captain Weirdiverse. I don't care what anyone else thinks.
The Dimension Police care. You can't quote someone by rephrasing what they said.
CW deserves respect. If you want to remove the quotation marks from the report, then be my guest. Ilona stared at me for a second and seemed to debate whether she should be upset with me or accept my point.
I'll make an annotation to the report then,
she said. Then she spoke into the air at the recorder.
Any mention by Lieutenant Vladimir in his recounting of events that pertain to the Captain, CWC, Captain Weirdiverse, or Cap, are about Captain Weenie. All future deviations by the Lieutenant where he has substituted Captain Weenie's name will be corrected accordingly to preserve the integrity of this report.
You know damn well I hate that name, I said, still with a trace of fleeting anger.
Vlad, I understand. And I know I can't force you to like it, but we must do this right. We've gone through this before.
And we all know that the name means the same to them as it does to us. CW is just too noble and naive to stand up against it.
That may be the case, but the reality is that it no longer means anything demeaning in the Weirdiverse. He is known as Captain Weenie, and with or without your approval, history will know him as such forever.
Whatever. Do your annotations, I said, being childish. I don't care. But I didn't mean that. It hurt to say it. Ilona. I'm sorry. It's just this anger. Villain's mood comes back with me.
I know. That's why I don't want you in Villain's memories. It is obvious you are still vulnerable to him. And it seems you were in his memories without even trying. You were supposed to be telling me what you and CW experienced.
Just don't pay attention to me when I am an ass, I said, not wanting to be told I couldn't do this. I must see it through. I need to understand. I'll do my best not to let it get to me. I was eager to see more, to navigate that world of memories, even if it caused me pain. Hoping for the best, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to help me concentrate.
Okay,
Ilona said reassuringly, and began to guide me.
Tell me about you and CW, Vlad.
I faintly heard her say. This time I blacked out almost immediately.
What did you do when you arrived and found the Space Armada there?
We sped through subspace, making impossible turns that bent the very fabric of space and time, skipping through dimensions like flipping pages on a book. Luckily, the Adiran battlefield outpost was near to the dimension we were in, so it didn't take long to arrive. In fact, the travel time was so short I was wiping my pants, still juggling the stupid pouch of coffee when we came to an immediate halt. It was so sudden the pouch flew out my hands and crashed against the consoles in front of me, splashing the rest of the coffee all over my face. I sputtered out a list of expletives, which I won't repeat. But when I saw the blob of Space Armada ships below us, I absolutely lost my shit. What in the f? I cried out and tried to jump out of my seat, forgetting that the seatbelt still restrained me. The mess all over my clothes became irrelevant, and my attention was solely on the monitors showing us the Space Armada surrounding this tiny planet. We had arrived between the planet and its moon, just in time to see the Armada shoot something that looked like bubbles of energy down toward the planet. Both CW and I started the processes to analyze what weapons they were using. I closed the large map of the cosmos to make room for other monitors. Working in silent unison, we made several screens appear around us as we entered commands into the keyboards. The computer scanned the Space Armada's attack. Then the individual bubbles from each ship converged into a giant sphere of energy. A screen appeared in front of both of us with the results. CW was shocked when he read it.
They shot a reversed magnetic pulse at the planet. Glad we must act quickly to neutralize it before the planet's core absorbs it.
I concentrated our scanners on it to find a way to counteract it. Luckily, its pulsing movement down into the planet's atmosphere had slowed down. A monitor appeared in front of my face, shattering my quick glimpse of hope. Probability 0% flashed red on it. It's too big, C. There is no way to neutralize it on time with the weapons on this stupid explorer. CW was appalled at the result, but could not surrender the possibility of being able to defuse the situation. He used the scanners to check for life on the planet.
Glad we must rescue the beings in those settlements,
he said, pointing at the monitor with images of the dwellings in the impact zone.
Our priority has to be to move them from there and save their lives.
I inadvertently glared at CW with a skeptical look on my face. See, that's a little bit more than 100 ships, man, I said with as much exaggerated sarcasm as I could. I don't think they are going to just let us get past them to reach the planet's surface before the reversed magnetic whatever hits.
The orb's energy,
CW explained,
will cause catastrophic damage to the gravity field in the area upon contact with the surface, which may upend the ground and destroy everything on it.
I contemplated silently, biting my tongue, trying to think of a plan as we both observed the giant reversed magnetic pulse bubble. It pulsated away from the space armada, creeping down through the planet's upper atmosphere. Knowing better than to argue with him at that point, I fought against my instincts and piloted us toward the planet, hoping to break through the space armada curtain of ships. At once, and in perfect synchronization, the top line of their formation turned in our direction. When we continued toward them, they shot a salvo of superheated bolts of plasma at us. I maneuvered safely from the firestorm, but it effectively kept us from getting any closer to them. Crap, I said and brought our shuttle back around for a second try. Again, the blaze of enemy plasma bolts turned us around. They aren't coming after us, see, I realized aloud, but I don't think we can get past them this way.
Glad we have to do something, and we have to do it quickly,
CW said with a familiar tone of unwavering resolve. I know that, C. I got anxious. I hated when CW had to do something, because it meant that his code of honor had kicked in. That usually meant the most logical or self-preserving plan was not the first option for him. Then I noticed something peculiar in one of the monitors. I recognized the markings on some of the spacecraft among the space armada. They belonged to the Dimension Police. See, look at the armada, I exclaimed and pointed to one of them. Villains stole our ships. CW leaned forward.
Glad if he stole the ships, who was piloting them?
Good question, but look below them. The armada ships are over the major settlement on the planet, and the inhabitants are all concentrated in the target zone. I zoomed the monitor in to help find the most evolved species. The Dimension Police database identified them as froggies, but we didn't seem to have much more information about them. They looked primitive, and didn't stand a chance against an attack with this type of technology. Then a crazy idea struck me. I thought about it for a second, but in some crazy way it made sense. How about I catapult you right through the space armada? It sounded more ridiculous saying it than it did thinking it, but that had been the bread and butter of our relationship for the past 2 years. They aren't very accurate with their shooting, I said. And they aren't actively trying to chase us and destroy us. So I can distract them and make them fire at me while you jump down past the blockade. Once down on the surface, you can move as many of these froggy guys as you can to a safer spot until we can rescue them.
Very well, Vlad,
CW agreed as he stood up and walked to the back of the ship, where he picked up his DP uniform and a communicator. He placed the speaker into his ear and the microphone behind the golden medallion on his chest. He then put on his uniform over his red suit like a set of coveralls.
Prepare the airlock for exit.
His voice echoed inside the cockpit. His determination and positivism were felt through the speakers as they were from his own mouth. Having had a few more seconds to rethink the idea, I shook my head in disbelief. Oh sure, let's go with the first half-assed idea I come up with. Let's torpedo you from outer space down into a planet, I said sarcastically, but I knew there was no turning back. CW entered the exit pressure hatch.
Commander,
CW's voice came out of the speakers inside the ship again.
are you online with us? Have you received our visuals?
I flew away from the space armada.
Yes, Captain.
The commander replied with his scratchy voice.
Our units are still rallying and will be ready to assist you shortly. We need an orchestrated attack. What you are doing is risky, but we do not have time, as remaining idle will result in many more deaths. I wish you success, Captain. Vlad,
The commander's stern voice shocked me straight up in my chair.
we need readings of Villain's Armada.
Half embarrassed at being ordered around, I responded in a belligerent manner. Hey, can't we wait to do the record keeping until we actually do something for?
Lieutenant Vlad.
He interrupted me. The commander was never particularly fond of my outbursts, but I now understand that at that moment, time was of the essence, and we had none to waste.
Provide us with scans of Villain's space armada. This will help us gain more insight into what other civilizations he has destroyed to gain such a remarkable fleet.
He said, this time in a much softer tone. Commander? I asked abruptly as another idea struck me. If I use our ion cannons on our stolen assets, would that destroy them? I must confess that I knew the answer to that question, but I felt leading the commander on to explain it to me would pad his ego and get him off my ass.
No, Vlad.
He answered calmly.
It would disable the electronics, but if their core systems have not been tampered with, a chemical life support system will engage. The pilots will be fine for several hours. This may give us time to rescue them.
Permission to blast them with the ion cannon then.
I understand what you are planning. Permission granted.
Awesome, I said, concentrating again on this godforsaken plan of mine. Ready for depressurization, C?
Ready.
CW answered enthusiastically. The airlock swished open, exposing CW to the vacuum and coldness of space. He climbed out onto the roof of our shuttle and knelt on the stern, unaffected by any of it. Not like it can hurt you anyway, I grunted, fighting against the whiplash of accelerating to almost 30,000 miles per hour. Our spacecraft's technology included a gravity field and a cockpit inertia regulation system to help with the G-forces, yet sudden accelerations like these and jumping into quantum space took a fraction of a second to adjust to. I activated the cameras and scanning equipment. There you go, Commander, I said, clicking on the booster thrusters just as I pushed my groaning fat shuttle into a steep dive. As expected, when we approached the Armada's previous boundary, the front line switched positions and shot their guns. Go, go, go. I yelled at CW, which prompted him to jump at the apex of the dive to catapult himself above the incoming blasts and toward the Space Armada swarm below. I locked a camera on CW, after I finished circling to face the incoming attack and the horde of ships again. He appeared on one of my monitors, graciously swan diving into the fray. With a couple of speed bursts I flew past him, triggering the Armada to shoot at me again instead of him. Here's when the fun begins. I cackled at the top of my lungs, leaning over the controls to steer directly into the attack.